Good morning and welcome to this homeless training. I'm Carl Hetler, coordinator of homeless outreach for the city of South Bend, and we're grateful to have Jamie Reinebold, who is the
Reinebold, right.
Youth Service Bureau Clinical Director. So Jamie, tell us a little bit about the kind of work you do for YSB to start.
As the clinical director, I oversee all of the clinical aspects of all the programs that we do. I do staff training. I do, what do I do? I do lots and lots of things. I monitor any youth who might be suicidal, get them the help they need. I work in the shelter for not much longer. I'm going to kind of step back from the shelter as the therapist there. So it's doing assessments on kids, doing family sessions, family meetings, trying to figure out how we can solve the problem that's causing the youth to either run away or be at risk or be aggressive at home. I also will this fall start a parenting class for parents of adolescent children, which is something that is rare as hen's teeth. We have all kinds of classes for new parents, but we don't have anything for parents of teenagers, and it's called Positive Parenting. It's a 10-week course. It's evidence-based. It's one of the leading parenting classes that the juvenile justice system uses. So we're hoping that that will help parents understand their teenager and how to parent more effectively.
Great. We'll get a link for that and put that in the YouTube comments so that people can follow up and be able to know how to register and refer families to that. That sounds really helpful. Sure. Tell us a little bit about some of the staff training that you do. What are some of the topics that you focus on when you're doing training for your staff?
Well, Youth Service Bureau is a trauma-informed agency, so I do a lot of trauma work, teaching staff about trauma and the effects on kids' brains and therefore the effects on their behavior. I do, how to keep yourself safe around kids, because kids have become much more aggressive than they used to be, I believe.
What's an example of for staying safe? What's an example of a tip that you give to your staff that might be helpful for people who are working with youth in other contexts?
One of the things I teach them is to stay out of the danger zone, which is about 3 feet at least away from a kid who's ramped up and seems to be struggling with maintaining their emotions. So you don't move in, you don't, you have to be really sure about your own body language. Are you being aggressive back to the, aggressions back to them, your tone of your voice, what you say, and mostly it's listen more than talk. And when kids are really, really dysregulated, it's not the time to talk, because they cannot talk. They cannot explain what's going on in any kind of way that makes sense. So you have to wait until they calm down and then talk about the situation or what happened or what would you do differently and that kind of.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Those are some great tips.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, when you talk about the trauma impact on the brain, how do teenage brains develop differently and act differently from either kids or from those of us who are adults? How is the teenage brain different?
So the basics of brain development are the brain develops from the bottom up and the inside out. So if you notice a babies, you can't hold a conversation with a newborn, right? Because their brain is really at this pretty primitive stage, right? They eat, they cry, they potty, they can't even roll over. But as they grow, their brains grow with them. And so the very, very last part of the brain to develop is the frontal cortex, right? So that's where all of our higher reasoning is, where our executive functioning, consequences, all that's the very, very last thing to develop. And that doesn't really develop. They're looking at like 20 until they're 20, you're 25. They used to say like 21, but it is now like 25. I can remember my daughter drove me. She was the worst at lessons. I could not tell this kid anything. But one day she was about 23 and she called me and she said, "Mom, you were right. All along you were right." And I was like, okay, well, we're not celebrating Christmas at our house anymore. We're going to celebrate the day Sarah's frontal lobe kicked in. So, yeah.
Yeah, and Ryan Dowd, for those who are familiar, talks about the amygdala, that inner part that develops a lot earlier for processing emotions and threat detection. That's early adolescence, the guard dog that develops, but the professor, that prefrontal cortex, as you're saying, isn't until like mid-20s when that really develops.
And you know that amygdala, if it's constantly perceiving threat, that's what it's going to perceive in any situation. Any situation becomes a threat. And so sometimes that's why we see kids who, I call it going from 0 to 100 in 2 seconds. It's because that amygdala has never really been able to relax. It's always sending out the alarm. And so that's the response that you'll get.
Yeah, and so it's important for people working with youth to understand that the impact that trauma has on the brain, and then as you talked about, strategies to stay safe, and we'll go more in depth with that. Let's talk one other aspect about the brain is testosterone. How is testosterone impacting teenagers?
So testosterone, most people think it's a male hormone and only males have it, but that's not true because women have it, teenage girls have it. It's really not fully understood how it works, but it can be influenced by genetics, the environment, and other factors. The four things that testosterone does for us is aggression, risk-taking, and social behaviors and interactions, and mood and affect. So in aggression, the higher the testosterone, the more aggressive people are. And aggression is really a readiness to respond to a perceived threat. Doesn't have to be a real threat, just has to be, my brain is perceiving this as a threat and I need to protect myself. It can be influenced by social context and interactions. So on a football field, we want the players to be aggressive, correct? In the classroom, not so much. Right? So there is social learning to the testosterone flow or gateway or whatever you want to call it. Risk taking. So who doesn't know a teenager who doesn't ever take a risk? It's part of being a teen. And testosterone, unfortunately, it controls it reduces the cognitive control and increases the sensitivity to rewards. So we already have a brain that's not mature, and so is really struggling to understand A plus B equals C, meaning there's a consequence for my behavior, and I may not like that consequence. But but I'm also really sensitive to rewards. So my perceived rewards, which really can be anything. I mean, we want them to be positive, but rewards can be negative too. So,
what would be an example of a negative reward?
Well, I guess viewed negatively is a negative reward would be, so I did this really bad thing, but all my friends think I'm really cool now.
There's that social component. They're trying to impress their friends. So how do you address that within like your programs at Youth Service Bureau? How do you address that desire for risk taking and wanting to even reward if it's negative because of the social environment? Because you're not just working with individual youth, but often within a group context.
Right. So it's difficult, it's challenging, and it's not a simple process because kids, we get kids for 3 weeks in the shelter. What's been going on for 15 years in 3 weeks. And really, all of this kind of starts way back in toddlerhood. Oh boy. I think the biggest thing, and I think the thing that works the best, is just to listen to kids and help them process their beliefs around certain subjects, such as, so I stole his phone. And okay, that's your reward for negative behavior, right? Now I have a phone. But there's a victim here. So let's talk about the victim. How do you think that made them feel? A lot of it's teaching empathy because, and perspective taking that I do
that's really helpful.
every day. Yeah.
Understanding, thinking outside of themselves, helping them develop that prefrontal cortex and work through some of that. Let's also just back up a second. You mentioned a shelter that you work with. Describe for people about the shelter program there at YSB and the types of youth that need that service and kind of the overview of what you provide. So especially for agency that maybe would make a referral for a youth who might need that shelter setting.
So the shelter is open 24/7, 365. And we have a crisis hotline where people can call and inquire about if we have a bed, or a parenting question or a resource question. So we're always available. We went from an 8-bed facility to our new facility. If you haven't viewed it, if you haven't toured it, you need to come by and tour it. Is now 16 beds. So the kids who are eligible for our beds are 12 up to their 18th birthday, and they need to be homeless, which means they were put out or they ran away or parents disappeared, or at risk of being homeless. And we do have some kids who are detained there by DCS and the JJC, because in the JJC's case, they're not ready to return back to their family of origin. And in the DCS case, they're waiting for other placement. So the community kids, which the runaway and homeless youth, can stay up to 21 days. The placement youth, who are the DCS and the JJC, they can stay 20 days. We're not a locked facility. We don't do holds. We don't do isolation. We do a lot of talking. We're less inclined to take a kid who's aggressive, meaning has had physical contact with a police officer or a teacher or a person of authority, just because it's a safety risk, because we don't do holds. So we,
Yeah.
So
You mentioned there's 16 beds on average
Mhm.
right now because you've been open less than a year. How many youth on average do you have there on any given night?
Um, Currently we have 2, but this summer we've had 8. So 8 is a lot. 16
Yeah.
is going to be really a lot. But yeah, probably between 3 and 4 on a typical week. We'll cycle in and out.
Yep. And then also just because you mentioned the Safe Station phone number that's available 24/7 is 574-235-9396. And we'll
Correct.
put that in the show notes also for people, but want to make sure people have that phone number if they know a youth who's in crisis and fit those criterion. That's really helpful.
And then
We've been talking.
we,
Go ahead.
sorry, Carl. We also
No.
have the safe place sites, which are it's a it's a yellow triangle. They're uh, buses, fire departments, Martins, Burger King, hospitals, schools. If a child comes and says, "I need help," then that agency will call us, and we come out to the wherever the child is and kind of triage and see what's going on. If the child's willing to come back to the shelter, we'll bring them back to the shelter, and then begin the process of trying to work out how to fix or how to put a Band-Aid on what's going on at home and get them some resources.
That's great. And I think libraries too.
Libraries too. Yep. Yep.
Great. So we've been talking about some of the impacts of youth behavior, the reward seeking, especially around
Mhm.
social context. We've talked about risks also, some of the risks that youth take. What are some of your strategies to help decrease the risk taking or build other awareness for youth about the risks that they might be taking? Are there other ways that you're addressing that risk taking behavior that can sometimes be dangerous and not thinking through all the consequences?
I use a lot of trauma focused CBT, so which is really thinking about how you're thinking about something. Um, um, so it, you know what, the magic bullet truly is to sit down and talk to them and listen to what they have to say, because I think a lot of times teenagers are kind of, oh, you don't know what you're talking about, and you don't have the life experience and blah 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 blah, but they really do want to talk about it, and they want to process it, and they want someone who's not, yelling and aggravated or frustrated, to just sit with them and talk about the consequences and talk about the long-term effects of what you're doing now. And that's really the strategy that I have. And just the shelter is a very calm, low drama space, probably calmer than classrooms are anymore. So it gives kids a safe place to just kind of decompress and talk about what's going on.
And that's a helpful strategy for other agencies who can create that safe, calm space for youth, or even be
Hmm.
available to have those conversations when you're not yelling or frustrated, but to be able
Right,
to listen and help you think about what they're thinking through.
right.
There's a question about, what services you provide for youth after they turn 18. If they can't do safe shelter, are there other programs that YSB does for youth who are over 18 and maybe still in high school or just out of high school?
So we have transitional living. We have 2 transitional living programs. One is for young moms who are pregnant or parenting between the ages of 18 and up to their 22nd birthday. And the other is for males or females um, who are homeless and need resources and case management and kind of parenting, really, to tell you the honest truth. It's like, how do you get up in the morning? How do you get to work? How do you problem solve if your ride doesn't come? How do you talk to your boss? Those kind of things. It's a lot of life skills that we teach them.
Yeah. Is there a wait list for that currently?
There is. There seems to always be a wait list. It's an 18-month program, so some kids don't need to stay 18 months. They kind of get their housing in line, their employment in line, or school in line, and they kind of graduate early. Some kids really need that 18 months to put a strong foundation down, so when they leave, they have the tools that they need.
Yeah. And some of those youth are living in the Thrive apartments that are opening up next door. Is that correct?
Hopefully, yes. Yes.
Yeah, I know we'll also have.
They're not quite there yet, but that's where they will kind of graduate to.
Yep, I know that's permanent supportive housing. That we also have adults who are coming out of other shelters, are even living there, and then some other general population people also, for a total of 54 units there at the
And then we'll
Thrive.
continue to do aftercare case management with them if they choose to.
Yep, that's great. So we've talked about the reward and risk parts of youth. Let's talk about what we as adults can do to show fairness and respect, because those are two other things that are very important to youth. So how does YSB work to develop fairness, because youth have that perceived sensitivity, or that greater sensitivity to perceived unfairness? How do you address that distinction of youth?
In the shelter, there we have a schedule, we have rules for everyone, blah blah blah, and the rules are for everyone. We don't, okay, well, you were good today, so you get this. It doesn't work that way. It's a blanket rules for everyone. So there is no unfairness possible, I guess. And I think parents need to remember those kind of things, that especially if you have adolescents who are close in age and one has more freedom than the other one, or gets more things or whatever, that the one who's not getting even attention feels very, I don't know, picked on, isolated, and that can cause.
I remember that with my kids when they were younger.
Oh yeah. It can cause behavioral problems, because again, that testosterone is asking them to seek dominance in situations. And so you have to be fair. You just, everybody's got to have the same rules, and everyone needs to be treated the same way.
And that applies not only for the youth, that they're treated similarly, but I know Ryan Dowd makes this point in his training about being consistent among the staff and adults, then also, that you can't have more strict staff who are targeting teens, but everyone needs to agree on the same principles for your staff and be equally trained with their approach.
Right. And the other thing that becomes a problem too is, so we have shifts, and if one shift is kind of loose with the rules, then the next shift comes on and they're not loose with the rules, then there's a lot of conflict and triangulation, like, well, Miss Susie said I could do that, and how come you won't let me do that? And just becomes very messy. So we try to make sure that staff are all on the same page, all following the same rules, because you can't run a facility without rules. You just can't. It would be chaos.
Right. Multiple staff to make sure everyone's on the same page. and understands the rules and is ready to enforce them.
Right.
One of the things Ryan brings up is that to only issue warnings if you're prepared to follow through with them. And that if rules aren't worth enforcing, maybe you need to consider ending that rule if it's not
Right.
something that is worth that enforcement.
Right.
Have there been examples in your time at YSB with rules that you have changed that you realized weren't, necessary or worth enforcing, that you've made adjustments over the years in your time there, Jamie?
I think probably the one that kind of sticks out in my mind, just because this was an issue recently, is dress code for the kids. So I've done this for 25 years, and kids' clothing has changed a whole lot. And we try to make sure that they're dressed appropriately. But one thing was, probably 10 years ago, it was a big deal if girls wore leggings, and we've kind of loosened that up because sometimes that's all they have. And so I'm not going to tell them you can't wear what you have and what you're comfortable in, as long as it's appropriate and you're acting appropriately in that. But that's probably one.
That's a good example.
Mm-hmm.
That can be very subjective and very personal.
Oh yeah, yeah.
What about vaping? Because I know that's become a lot more popular among youth. How do you address that within the population there?
So, oh boy, it's a conversation. Again, it's a life skills education. We have life skills education after dinner every night. And so that's one of the things that we talk about, making healthy choices. We don't allow kids to vape here. They can't be in possession of any kind of tobacco or illicit substance at all. So if we find it when they come in, if it's an illicit substance, we'll destroy it. If it's tobacco or a vape, we lock it up and hand it back to their parent at exit, because they're underage and cannot be in possession of those kind of things.
Yeah, well, that's a great example of a clear boundary that you have to enforce,
Mm-hmm.
and a
Mm-hmm.
rule that you hold to for everyone. So
Mm-hmm.
those are great ways to show fairness. The last topic that I want to discuss with you was about respect.
Mm-hmm.
What are ways that adults can show respect to youth? What are some things that we should remember about being respectful to youth when we're interacting with them?
It's really about communication. It's about your body language. It's about what you say. It's about how you say it. It's about letting kids have a voice, letting them talk. Don't overtalk them. Let them have an idea or a plan, and don't say, "Oh, that's a stupid, that's not going to work. What are you thinking?" Blah 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 blah. But process through that plan. Okay, so if you do this, what's the likelihood of this will happen? If you do that, what's the likelihood of that will happen? Because you're really trying to train that frontal part of their brain to kick in and start using doing what it's made to do. I think one of the things that's really difficult is that whole respect thing, because I hear a lot of parents come in and they say, he doesn't respect me, or the kid says she doesn't respect me. And I have to sit and say, well, I know what respect looks like in my life, in my house, but what does that look like in your life, in your house? And a lot of times they can't really explain it. So we have to sit and talk about really what's respect. It's about giving people autonomy, privacy, respect for other people's belongings. So it's a difficult thing to really. There's not one cookie cutter thing that says, oh, if you do this, then you'll show respect to kids, because all kids are different and they come from different places. So
yeah, that's a good point.
On the street, respect is a whole different thing, right? You can't on the street, you can't show any kind of fear. I try to talk to kids about anger, and the basis of anger, the building block of anger is fear. And they, oh no, I'm not afraid of anything. Nope, not afraid of anything. Yeah, you are. You just don't recognize you are. But it's really about listening. Let them talk.
Yeah, that's a helpful reminder. Thanks for that. I do want to circle back to one thing you mentioned at the beginning about the work you do monitoring youth who are suicidal. And because I know that's something that Oaklawn is reporting a lot more issues with ideation. What are some just general pointers for the public about youth who are maybe thinking about suicide? What are helpful things that we should know for interacting with youth who maybe are having thoughts about ending their life? What would be some pointers that you would share with us?
It kind of depends on the context and where is that happening. The biggest thing is safety first. And so you have to get the kid to somewhere safe, right? The therapy part of suicide ideation is not something that can be done in 5 minutes. So what I say about the suicide intervention programs that we have, that's like the ambulance coming, right? It's the ambulance coming, but it's not the doctor who treats whatever it is that's wrong. So you have to make sure the kids are safe, and then reach out for the help that they need.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll mention another great program is Oaklawn has a mobile youth team that's available 1 p.m. to 8 p.m. Monday through Friday right now. 574-533-1234 extension 1 for their crisis line. But that youth team is available to come out and work with youth. And that's the number one issue that they're responding to right now across St. Joseph County and Elkhart County is suicidal youth and aggression are the top two issues that they're seeing among young people today. So those are definitely issues across our community. Well, Jamie, I want to thank you. Oh, go ahead. Final comment.
No, go ahead. I was just the one thing about a suicidal youth is you never leave them alone. Never, ever, ever. In your agency, anywhere, somebody needs to have eyes on them at all time until you get them the help that they need.
Great. That's a great pointer. Thank you for that. Thanks for everything that you've shared, Jamie, today. We appreciate your work as clinical director at Youth Service Bureau and the time you've taken to give us some good insights into the teenage brain and mind and how we can better work with them in our community.
Thank you.